Hello, everyone. My name is Ariana, and my project is on the Pixar theory and how all the Pixar movies are interconnected with each other and how they all follow a timeline. So, the Pixar theory essentially is just the connection of all the Pixar movies and the timeline that they all seem to follow because they do. Chronologically, they follow the timeline. When you search the Pixar theory, there's going to be a lot of videos that pop up, and none of those videos that you see are the actual creator of the Pixar theory. The actual creator is John Negroni. He wrote a book about it, and unfortunately, I couldn't get that as a source, but he is the best person to explain the Pixar theory, and he is able to do a much better job than I will, but I'm going to try my best. Now, why would this be important to know? I think it's important because it shows how the directors and the animators and the producers of every one of these Pixar movies has made sure that they have intermingled the timeline. They have made sure to keep true to the timeline as a way to finish it. Chronologically, the Pixar movies would follow this order: The Good Dinosaur, Brave, The Incredibles 2, Toy Story, Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, Ratatouille, Toy Story 3, Toy Story 4, Up, Inside Out, Coco, Cars, Cars 2, Cars 3, WALL-E, A Bug's Life, Monsters University, and Monsters Inc. Now, if you think about all of those movies, they do seem to follow a chronological timeline. And with that, you are able to see that it does kind of make sense, just based on the way that those movies are ordered chronologically. But when you get into each of the movies and you realize what's going on, it makes a little bit more sense. So you start with The Good Dinosaur and how the asteroid actually ends up missing the Earth, and that's why the dinosaurs are still around when man is around. And what ends up happening is that the dinosaurs tend to take on humanistic traits. And by that, I mean they start farming and they start wrangling other animals because they can, and they just act more like people than they do dinosaurs. They just do it in a dinosaur way. At the end of The Good Dinosaur, we see that the boy that travels with Arlo ends up going with a family. And that family then reproduces, and the world gets filled with people, dinosaurs are dead, and what ends up happening is we jump all the way to the 16th century where we find Brave. And Brave is the key piece to the whole Pixar theory that I will explain at the end. After Brave, we then go to The Incredibles and The Incredibles 2. And what ends up happening is that we have this war of machines versus supers. If you remember, Syndrome, near the end of the movie, is trying to defeat his own AI robot. And what ends up happening is that the AI robot gets smarter than Syndrome, and he realizes that Syndrome is the one controlling him, so he says, I don't think so. And he ends up disobeying Syndrome and does whatever he wants. So, with that, AI is kind of taken a turn, and the fact that AI is so powerful now, even in today's world, AI has become a lot more powerful than it was way back in the day. We have this machines versus supers. So the supers are trying to beat the machines, and the machines are trying to beat the supers. It's kind of a never ending circle. After that, then you get Up, Ratatouille, Finding Nemo, and Finding Dory. They're kind of all happening at the same time. And also all of the Toy Stories and Inside Out are all happening at the same time. The tech from Syndrome, he ends up being able to bring toys to life, like he brought an AI robot to life. So it's a little bit of a tech from there, but it's mostly love and joy and happy feelings, like you see in Inside Out and in Toy Story 4 when Forky comes alive. He knows that he's trash, but then he ends up becoming a real toy, and he becomes one of Bonnie's favorite toys. So the fact that love is powerful enough to bring trash to life for a little girl is kind of powerful. And what ends up happening in Up and Ratatouille and Finding Nemo and Finding Dory is that we notice that in all of those movies, all of the animals are taking on humanistic traits. By that, I mean animals in Up, the dogs are serving food and they're pouring champagne. This is also where we see the introduction of the By and Large company. By and Large is connected to the machines from The Incredibles. It doesn't specifically say, but you can definitely assume that as the times are changing, machines are getting more and more wantful, wishful, and so we're trying to keep up with the times. And in Ratatouille, animals are serving food. Uh, Remy, when he washes his hands, he's kind of humanistic because most of the time rats are just seen as dirty. And what happens is Remy is washing his hands all the time, and he walks on two legs like he's a human. Um, as well as in Finding Nemo, you can see that they have a stoplight system and they have a school system where they learn about all of the ocean and stuff like that. And when you get to Finding Dory, you notice that there is a lot of pollution in the ocean. Um, when you get to the scene just before the squid reveals itself, you notice that the whole place is filled with trash. And that is because of the supers and what happened with them. Because the supers in The Incredibles were so destructive in the first movie, they ended up having to go into hiding because they were hurting the the town more than they were helping. Granted, they were getting the bad guys, but at what cost to the rest of the city? So instead of rebuilding, they would rebuild the the city instead of taking the rubble and disposing of it properly, they would throw it in the ocean, which is why there is so much pollution in Finding Dory. Because of all the trash in Finding Dory, what ends up happening is that the trash becomes too much. And as we can see in the movie WALL-E, the earth is consumed by pollution. Consumed. There is no living being on Earth other than maybe a few animals here and there, such as ants and cockroaches and bugs in general. So what ends up happening is that the humans leave on the Axiom to wait for Earth to be green again, to be livable again. But it never happens. And what ends up happening is that while the people are on the Axiom, the cars that they left behind, somehow from the radiation from all of the pollution, ends up becoming alive. And what ends up happening is that their personalities are the personalities of their previous drivers. So Doc Hudson was an old school race car driver. That's the car he drove when he raced, and that is the personality that he took on. While there is also Lightning McQueen, who's a new young gun and ends up taking over that sort of personality of a brand new racer in a brand new style of car. But while that's going on, you can notice in Cars 2 that there is an energy crisis. That oil is not good, that we need to stop using oil because it's prehistoric, and prehistoric means dead, which means it's not going to live forever. So, as you can see in the movie though, they notice that they do fill up. They do use fuel. They do use oil. But that can only last them so long before they end up just dying. After that, the humans come back from the Axiom. They plant the tree in WALL-E at the very end, and that ends up becoming the tree in A Bug's Life. Now, the scenery might not be the exact same, but that's because Earth has changed a lot over time. And you can tell that the ants have been around a long time because at one point in the movie, one of the ants says, "Oh man, I feel like I'm 90 again." Ants only live a few days, if not a few months, let alone 90 years. These ants have been around for a long, long time because they didn't have any predators. So they just continued to multiply and multiply. Because there is still a whole lot of trash in WALL-E, we literally see a city of trash. That's what WALL-E is building all by himself, is a literal city of trash. And what ends up happening is that the radiation and all the chemicals from all of that trash ends up turning the humans from the Axiom into monsters, which is where we get Monsters Inc. and Monsters University. And when you watch Wally going into the city and going to do his job, you notice that literally almost everything is by and large, which is the same machinery that took over Carl's lot for his house, which was also connected back to the machines from The Incredibles. The fact that by and large took over this entire city, and I'm assuming the entire world, because everything on the Axiom is also by and large. The only thing that they had left was enough money to put the rest of the humans into space. What ended up happening when they came back is that they had an energy crisis, because there is no energy left on Earth that's humanistic. So the monsters figured out that they can go back in time, and scaring kids is kind of powerful. It is. Scares can be very powerful. So what they end up doing is going back before The Incredibles is happening. That's where everybody, prior to Sully and Mike Wazowski getting to the scare floor at the moment, um, is able to scare kids, is from back in the day. But their current date that they are using for the scare floor is when The Incredibles is going on. So by that, I mean that Sully is scaring kids that would be the same age as Dash and Violet from The Incredibles. They are scaring kids that are that young. And so they figure out how to use time travel, and they use the doors. What ends up happening is that when Boo is upset, she gets the lights start to flicker because she's in fear. But as soon as she starts laughing, it powers the entire block, and then it ends up popping the circuits and everything in the houses, or at least in their apartment. So they finally realize that laughter is a lot more powerful than that of fear. And that is similar to the movie Inside Out, where a lot of the memories that Riley has prior to the age of 12 are joyful memories. And by that, I mean, if you look at the wall of memories, you can see that almost 98% of them are joyful. And the other 2% are a mixture of fear, sadness, anger, and disgust. Because that joy is such a powerful thing, it ends up being a lot more powerful than fear. How it connects to Coco is that their culture believes in that of remembering the ones that have passed. So if you want to live in the land of the dead, there has to be at least one person that loves you and remembers you. Otherwise, as soon as the last person that had remembered you has died, you end up dying the final death. Overall, everybody has found someone that they love. But as we can tell in almost the last scene of Boo and Sully saying goodbye, is that Boo returns to her closet to find Sully again. And she realizes that Sully is never coming back. And she knows how powerful laughter is because she was the one that founded it. So what ends up happening is that she figures out how to time travel. and this is where it gets crazy, she figures out how to time travel and travels back to the 16th century to ensure that all of the events that have happened prior to her existence still continues to go on. And how she does that is she is the witch from Brave. She is the witch that does not conjure and whittle in the same area. How you can prove this is that there is a Sully carving which has no purpose to be there when everything is full of bears. There is also the Pizza Planet truck, which proves that she was around and knew about Pizza Planet from at least the Toy Stories up until Finding Dory. Finding Dory, Nemo, Ratatouille, all of those in between have at least one sighting of the Pizza Planet truck. In the end, you also see that she goes from her wood carving out and then back into her conjuring space. So the fact that she also has a magical door would connectively mean that she is Boo from Monsters University.